Hello, this is Parkinson. I am 55 and still feel young, and I have been living medication-free for over 5 years after being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in December 2020. Scan. Despite every doctor recommending that I take medication, I consciously decided against it and searched for alternative healing methods myself, which I researched carefully. This approach was successful. By autumn 2021, my symptoms had improved significantly and have remained stable to this day. On the 18th of August 2025, only 15 points were recorded in MDS-UPDRS Part 3, whereas in July 2021, it was still 19 points. That means an improvement of 4 points, which is truly unique. I used the pseudonym Parkinson to protect my privacy as an entrepreneur. I also publish all my medical reports. And on my website www.tamparkinson.de, I am well connected, and I find it really exciting when there is someone who has also managed to halt the progression of their Parkinson's. So far, however, I have not met anyone who has achieved comparable results. Feel free to tell your neurologist my story and ask about similar courses. It is very likely that there will be hardly any such cases, because conventional neurology generally starts with medication, as is taught during medical training. Here you can see an overview of the alternative healing methods I have used. TPS Neurolid, the V-Light Helmet, Sport, Homeopathy, Nutritional Supplements, the PDK, Microbiome Transfer. Those were the things that then led to an improvement in autumn 2021. Lithium and Tanganil were added in autumn 2024. And also psilocybin. And the stem cell therapy is very recent. That was at the beginning of January, when I received the first batch, and over the course of the year I will be having several more stem cell treatments. Neuro-EPO. I was in Cuba in November 2022, and then again in September 2024. So I have been taking it almost regularly since November 2022. I only had one break of a few months. Here you can now see the overview chart of my analysis of the course of the disease. You can see that in the initial phase, in the first 6 months, there were deteriorations in all areas. First in akinesia, which I measure using a speed test, and then enter here in the table. Then tremor. I measure that with the tremor pen. And you can see that it got worse in the first 6 months. And then, after I started the alternative therapies, namely TPS Neurolid, Pedicure, Homeopathy, V-Light and Microbiome Transfer, things improved. Then Neuro-EPO was added. That was in November 2022, and in September 2024 I was there in Cuba. So I have been taking Neuro-EPO since then, and a positive is that it gave me back my sense of smell. I can smell excellently again now. And then in autumn 2024, Tanganil and lithium were added. And now, very recently, which I have not marked in the table or the overview chart, there is the stem cell therapy. Here you can also see that I go for a monthly TPS top-up. Those are the red dots here. Better. And homeopathy, Felon, I take continuously. Yes. And down here, you can also see the MDS-UPDRS Part 3 measurement, which I had done in Munich in autumn 2021. And then in Mannheim on the 29th of April 2024, where I had these 14 points, and in Munich it was 19 points, so an improvement of 5 points. And then on the 19th of August 2025 in Mannheim, I had another measurement. It was 1 point worse, but still 4 points better than at the start. This is as of the 18th of June 2025. I have not updated the table for a while now, but that is a joke. The costs and the effect, in other words, How I assess which alternative healing methods are the most effective. So, in my opinion, the cheapest is definitely, and of course, sport. As a rule, I do exercise about 5 times a week for roughly an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. Cycling. When I'm on holiday, I do a lot of walking, sometimes 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kilometers. Then there's the TPS, which initially costs about €3,000 to €4,000, and then you've got the monthly running costs. They're about €500. There are also providers who offer it a bit cheaper. I've heard €400 or €350. Cuba. If you go once a year for a few weeks, plus monthly. Taking the medication, you take it nasally. One can costs about $100, so that comes to about $20,000 a year. Microtransfer is relatively inexpensive. It's about $1,000 per microtransfer. The supplements, depending on how high quality they are and how intensively you want to use them, I'd say I spend around €300 to €500. Homeopathy is quite inexpensive, but in my view, it's also quite effective. With the pedi, there's a one-off cost of about €1,200 or €1,300. Then, of course, this placebo, this mental focus, costs nothing. You just have to work on it. The V-Light helmet, I think that costs about $1,500. The Ayurveda treatment with Dr. Shakinger, I think I paid about $7,000 in Austria. Then, of course, it can potentially cost a lot. If you simply stop, work less, then you might also earn less. And of course, it's also work-life balance, of course, is also effective if you go through life in a relaxed way and don't let yourself get so stressed out. €10, 12K. So fasting costs nothing, of course. You don't need anything for it. Then it's important to keep your teeth in good shape. Then there's PS 128. That's the probiotic. Ige, Tanganil, or N-acetyl-L-leucine. It's very exciting. From Professor Ertel. Then I've now had stem cell therapy at the beginning of January, shortly before I flew to Thailand. And I paid $20,000 for the first 3 treatments, but I'll probably do 10. In the end, that'll cost me about €35,000. I'm curious to see what that brings. Exactly. And lithium, which is also interesting, is actually very inexpensive too. At least that's inexpensive. The stem cell therapy was, of course, very expensive. Yes. So the most recent ones are right at the top, because if you scroll further down, you're basically scrolling back into the past. Here you can see the Dremipan, how I hold it, very steady in my right hand. If you follow it further, there's a value of 20 that I have there with my hand outstretched. Then here you can see my handwriting as I write down my website www.tomparkinson.de. That also works very well. Here I'm doing my jumping jacks. Yes, here I'm doing a few press-ups on an incline. Here I made a video when I was in Thailand last year. It must have been January. Yes, January 2025. Cuba. Here you can see the different exercises I do. It's always very interesting. Walking forwards, backwards, sideways, playing with the balls, and so on. There's always a lot going on for hours a day. These exercises are also very effective. The Thailand video. Here I'm doing balance exercises in September 2023. You can see me rotate my hands, right and left, and how slowly the left moves now. I measure that as well, and it's reflected in my chart. I'll skip around a bit more. That was September 23 again. This is Cuba, November 2022. The other videos won't play because the connection is very bad here in Thailand. Here's something else interesting. This was shortly before Cuba, the 21st of October 2022. It was a sort of application video. You can see that my left arm doesn't swing along very well. Jumping jacks. Interesting. And here, the 22nd of December 2020, and it's very interesting to see, because below is about 2 years later, exactly, about 2 years later, and you can see that it's better in 2022 than it was after the diagnosis. And that's really cool, of course, because the mobility of my left hand has improved. You can see how slow it is here. And the right one is simply faster, but the left hand has also become faster. Without medication, mind you. It's been 5 years now, over 5 years. Let's see how it goes from here. Sport and exercise are undisputed. It's one of the most effective measures for slowing the progression of Parkinson's if you have it. In general, of course, it's also the case that everything that helps you live longer, and that obviously includes sport and building muscle, is also good for Parkinson's, right? So you really have to keep going, use it or lose it. You have to stay active. There are numerous studies on this. New ones keep popping up, so we don't need to go into the details now. It's undisputed. At the beginning I did yoga and qigong. Later I moved on to kettlebells a bit more intensively, and dumbbell training. At the moment I'm more focused on strength training and building a bit of muscle. I don't put on much, but I keep trying. Rowing machine. Here is my mountain bike, which I ride around the Bergstrasse area, near Heidelberg. Here is my kettlebell. The weight can be adjusted. It's flexible, just like the 2 dumbbells you can see to the right of it. Then, I had an Oculus Quest 2, or rather now, I have an Oculus Quest 3 VR headset. You can play virtually with it. For example, I do table tennis with my left hand, and a boxing program. Boxing is also very good. But in principle, it doesn't matter what you do, right? You can dance, cycle, jog, whatever. Some things work better, others not so well, though. You can see in the Cuba video that cross-body exercises like that are very effective, of course. But ultimately, it's about moving, sweating a bit, and getting your pulse up sometimes. Then I also have the SRT Zeptoring, but I'm not using it anymore at the moment. I use the infrared sauna more often in winter. Then I tried ice bathing once, 10 minutes at 8 degrees Celsius, but in the long run it was too much effort for me, so I stopped doing that as well. Yes, and here I have an overview of my weekly routine. It's a bit older. Back then, I did more. These days, I do about 30 to 40 minutes a day, and a bit more in summer, because I also go cycling. I normally do strength training, then kettlebells, then boxing and table tennis. Routine. When I'm on holiday, I don't train, but I walk a lot then, sometimes up to 10 kilometers a day, on city trips and also walking around in the countryside. Improved. So now I can walk for kilometers without anything cramping up. It has developed very positively. Nutrition is, of course, also an important topic. I avoid industrially processed foods. I avoid dairy products, especially cow's milk. I don't go to the baker. I mostly avoid wheat products, but on holiday, I'll happily eat a croissant or a roll too. But normally I don't eat wheat products, so I don't even go to the bakery in the first place. I don't eat breakfast anyway, because I do intermittent fasting. 16:8, and I've now also done a fasting mimicking diet following Professor Dr. Michelson, and I want to do that twice a year, regularly. Water fasted. The fasting mimicking diet is a bit more accessible. Alcohol. It helps you relax too, of course. Sugar is of course really bad. You should avoid sugar as much as possible. And perhaps pay attention to an alkaline diet. And the Ayurvedic diet is of course also very good. I've already been to Dr. Schackinger in Austria for an Ayurveda course, and that did me a lot of good as well. Neuralit TPS, transcranial pulse stimulation, comes from Switzerland and is approved for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. I had 6 treatments from the 29th of September 2021 to the 6th of October 2021. I paid about €35,000, and I also go for a monthly booster. It costs about €54 a month, and that means I spend about €8,000 on it until my health insurance covers it, which it actually does almost always. So in recent years it has covered it. And there are also more and more treatment centers worldwide. Currently there are 93. Most of them are in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, but there are also some in Thailand or Dubai, I think. So they are a bit scattered around the world. Click here for Dr. Losbush's full article. He was the one who used it first, I think on his brother, who had Parkinson's. And there's a very interesting report about it, and of course there are studies as well. So if anyone is more interested in this, they can of course speak to their doctor. As I said, there are lots of treatment centers in Germany, lots of doctors who offer this, and you can get advice there. And you can of course read the reports here on my website, or search on the internet with Google. You'll definitely find something. Here is my photo. That was right at the beginning, when I received my first treatment. That was at Lake Chiemsee down there near Munich, Bavaria. Transplantation, microbiome transfer, in my opinion, is one of the most important topics if you have Parkinson's. It was performed on me for the first time on the 12th of November 2021. That was in Leipzig. I battled for a long time to get there, because at that time these microbiome transfers were not yet that common in terms of how they were carried out, at least not for Parkinson's. In the meantime, things have loosened up a bit, and there are also a few providers in Germany. Then in autumn 2022, I had another treatment in Slovakia. And you can tell that even after the first treatment, funnily enough, even before I got Parkinson's, I had already had a stool test done. It was very, very bad, and after the first microbiome transfer it got significantly better. Down here, there are also reports about it. I also created a PDF on my website, where you can see what the comparison looks like. Wait. Microbiome transfer. It's listed again there, and here there's a microbiome evaluation. Not completely up to date, but I do a stool test every 6 months, and it gets published as well, so you can see how it develops over time. Everything is published on my side. Here are also the clinics that carry out the microbiome transfer. There are, of course, a lot of reports. There are always new documentaries, always new articles. The gut microbiome is key in many diseases, even depression, and it's linked to cancer too. There are countless connections we're only starting to understand today. Feel free to click through these videos here. They're mostly YouTube videos. It's explained wonderfully there, plus all the reports about it. It's a very topical issue. You should definitely do that, and it's not expensive either. It costs about €1,000, so you should really consider having it done. But of course, discuss it with your doctor. That's clear. I don't want to be responsible for what you do. Neuralson, Neuro-EPO, Cuba. Yes, I was there from the 14th of November to the 5th of December 2022. I had treatment there. They were very positively surprised by me when I arrived, and they were already wondering why I was doing so well. I already tried a few alternative therapies there, and they were successful. And then I was there for a few weeks. And what was really striking was that, right after the first treatment with Neuro-EPO, which is taken nasally, my sense of smell improved significantly. And I also feel that I've now been taking Neuro-EPO for over 2 years. My sense of smell is really at a very, very high level. So I'm very happy about that. And even if Neuro-EPO, shall we say, mainly improved my sense of smell, that was already a success for me and a reason to keep taking it, because it seems to have a positive effect. And you know that most Parkinson's patients, in my opinion, have problems with their sense of smell. And for me, that's of course a sign that the medication has a positive effect. There are also joint ventures planned, and so on. So you just have to scroll through my website here. There are also further details and links. Here you can see me with EMS Ivan Pedroso. There is the Neuro-EPO. And here I am standing in the street with the ball. In my spare time, I also did a bit of extra sport. And here are the exercises we did there. Cuba. I put on the helmet 3 times a week, since the 6th of November 2021. In gamma mode. In early May 2023, I also bought the one from Simbex Biome. But in the end, I used it for a while, but then I went back to the V-Lite helmet. So the helmet on the left here. And I use it, as I said, 3 times a week, almost continuously now, since 11/2021. There's also a study on this, and you can find a lot online about the V-Light helmet. Yes, supplements. Still a hot topic. You can see from the picture what I consume and how much of it. And it might be worth buying my book. I'll click on book here. There's a part 2 now. I go into these dietary supplements in a bit more detail there, but the most important ones are shown here. But the B complex that I take, and vitamin C. D3 is of course very important. I usually take 5,000 international units a day. There are also links to the videos, the YouTube videos, where it's explained again in detail. That should definitely be in the upper range, and we should all get it checked every 6 months so you know where you stand. But I basically need those 5,000 international units a day. I also take creatine. Lithium is also very important. I don't take 20 milligrams anymore. I did that for half a year. At the moment, it's only 5 milligrams. I also had my level checked. We'll come back to lithium later. I also wouldn't let myself be put off by the many pharmacists or doctors who say, for God's sake, you can't take lithium. In my opinion, they just don't know. You really have to say it that clearly. Lithium is essential. Magnesium is of course crucial, very important. Omega-3 is important. Q10. Zinc. True nitrogen is a bit expensive, but it's also interesting. Astaxanthin. Vodka. So you do have to take some time, ideally sit at a PC, and then you can click on things here and watch the videos for them. So I'm not a doctor. I can't explain exactly what is for what, or how it works. Everyone has to take the time and work their way into the topic. Longevity is of course also important, isn't it? So I don't just want to get rid of Parkinson's in a few years, maybe in 5 or 10 years. I think it might be possible to correct it. It's about longevity, too. Yeah. Like glucosamine, spermidine, taurine, creatine, and so on. All pretty interesting, really. Right. That is something. We will come back to the longevity topic later. Lithium. Dr. Nels is an absolute pioneer in this area. He has also written various books about it. There are lots of YouTube videos with him. And in the past, lithium was used in high doses for bipolar disorder. I think they were given something like 800 milligrams to 1.2 grams or so, and then of course it becomes toxic, so you have to be careful. But we are talking about microdosing here. Specifically, Dr. Nels recommends that basically everyone should take 1 milligram. People who have some brain issues, like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, or who are psychologically struggling, should take 5 milligrams. Sometimes I went up to 20 milligrams. I began on 1 milligram, took 5, briefly, then 20 milligrams. Now I'm back to 5 again. I feel that things are a bit calmer in my head. I mean, I am relaxed anyway, but somehow it has made me a bit more laid back. However, lithium is actually prohibited in Germany. So you cannot really get it as a dietary supplement, but you can get it from abroad. I think I have also added a few links. Exactly, there is a link here. You can order it from the USA and from the Netherlands. And in the meantime, there is also a pharmacy for lithium, the Rosen Apotheke in Witterick near Fulda, and they offer it on prescription. So your doctor can write you a prescription. Provided they do not get a shock that you want lithium, because many doctors naturally have this high-dose lithium in the back of their minds. That is why they say, for heaven's sake, you should not take it under any circumstances, but that is nonsense. Because we are only talking about a very low dose here. And the Rosen Apotheke has specialized in this lithium, and then the health insurance even covers it. Or you can get it via water. For example, mineral water from Hirschkel has 1.3 milligrams of lithium in a 1-liter bottle. There is even the Albertkel in Bad Mergentheim, which has 13 milligrams, so a very high dose, so to speak, if you were to drink a bottle every day. And it is definitely important that you can have your lithium level measured. Lithium in whole blood, and that is available at the IMD Institute for Technical and Medical Diagnostics in Berlin. I had it tested too. The optimal range is between 25 and 350. Mine was 88. I had it measured on the 7th of October 2025. I take 5 milligrams a day. If you want to know exactly, you can get measured. I noted it here. It only cost me €28.44, and the doctor has to take your blood, and then you can send it off. So it does not cost much. People who are worried can get themselves tested, but nothing happens with 1 milligram anyway, and in my view not with 5 milligrams either. But if you want to be safe, get your lithium level checked again. There are basically only 2 institutes that measure this, because for bipolar disorder, when someone takes a gram, this measurement is done in a very low range, and there are not many institutes worldwide, or in Germany, that use it and can carry it out. Mystifying. But ultimately, I take 2 globules once a week. Reassured. Also back when I was in the clinic on Baltrum. There are no cars there. I took my bike with me, cycled around a bit. It is pretty windy up there. Dr. Friedrichs was there already, including meditation. And that did me very, very good. It helped me a lot. And there is also a statement here from M's Pop, whom I met up there, who treated me there and has been supporting me. Feel free to read it through. There are links for everything as well. And among the treatments, it is actually one of the cheapest ones out there. Yes. A friend of mine, his father got pancreatic cancer about 15 years ago, and a senior consultant at Heidelberg University Hospital operated on him, looked at his pancreas, said there was nothing more to be done, stitched him back up again, and said that in 3 months, or 6 months at the latest, he would probably be dead. And then Dr. Friedrich came along and told my friend's father that he would treat him homeopathically, and he got the medication, and yes, the father is still alive today. Yes. So there was also a media report about it. It was probably dismissed as a spontaneous remission. But that's sort of the story behind how I came to Dr. Friedrich. And yes, so homeopathy is of course very controversial. But it shouldn't be dismissed out of hand, especially when it comes to side effects and so on. I just can't imagine there being anything negative, and like I said, it's inexpensive as well, and I've got a good feeling about it, so why not, right? So for me it stays. I will definitely keep doing it. Yes, Tanganil. On the 2nd of September 2024, there was an article. If you click on it here, the article opens, the link to the article. And in my view, at the time, It was pretty much the best thing I'd ever heard. I've been thoroughly trawling the whole internet since the diagnosis, worldwide. I've made lots of contacts, and I've put in a good 1,000, or by now more like 2,000, hours of research into what's out there. I think I've scanned pretty much everything that exists. So at the moment, not that much surprises me anymore. And this Tanganil apparently works very well for REM, sleep behavior disorder. That's basically a precursor stage of Parkinson's disease. Some people have it, I don't. But some people do get these sleep problems, and Professor Ertel found that if you take Tanganil, then Parkinson's can even be reversed, and they even proved it with the DAR scan in 2 patients. OTC solution. But unfortunately it didn't work, not in the sense I'd imagined anyway. And I've been taking it for over a year now. And I'm going to keep taking it for another year to see whether anything happens, and maybe even increase the amount, simply increase the dosage. To find out more about Tanganil, you'll need to go to my homepage. There's more information there. My experiences with it are on there too, so there's a lot more info on my homepage. Yes, I've only just started stem cell therapy. I booked it on the 6th of October 2025. On the 2nd of December 2025, some abdominal fat was taken from me. And now on the 12th of January 2026, one day before my holiday in Thailand, I flew out on the 13th. Here's a photo of me. Can you make it bigger? Yes. There I am, lying there on the bed, and I'm being given my first secretome. Next time, it will be administered into the spinal canal. And here, there's a plan. Here is the Tom Parkinson site. I signed up straight away. That was the liposuction. Now I've had a treatment. And next time, I'll probably treat myself to the triple dose. And I've got 10 in total available. So by the end of the year, I'll probably have used them all up. And I hope that in a few months, I'll see something positive develop. Then I put together an overview here, an Excel spreadsheet, where I compared the different institutes. So of course what was very interesting, and that was also the reason I got more interested back then, was what was going on in Japan, South Korea, and at BioStar. They've successfully treated 137 patients. However, that costs about 60,000 euros, including flights, accommodation, and the hotel. And yes, if anyone wants to know more, they have to go to my website and can find out more there. I've now had treatment at Anova IRM in Frankfurt-Offenbach, which is of course practical because it's only 70 kilometers for me. And what is of course still to come? I think it will probably be accessible to us between 2028 and 2030. That's when dopamine-producing cells are implanted into the brain. Of course, it's a slightly more invasive procedure and not entirely without risk. But they have already successfully treated patients there. Yes, hang on while this opens. Here, Blue Rock is leading. They have already treated 12 patients. But for example, in China, they have already treated 50 patients. So worldwide, there are about 10 institutes that offer this. Dopamine-producing stem cells, straight into the brain. And they also seem to remain active long-term, and there are motor improvements, so it works. So I think in a few years it will become interesting for us. And something else that's very interesting is stem cell rejuvenation. There's an interesting video by Hartmut Geiger, Dr. Hartmut Geiger. Together with Nina Rouge, they did an interview. So there's really a lot going on there. Exosomes are also an exciting topic. Here there's also another link with the YouTube video of Nina Rouge and the professor. A lot is happening. Over the next few years, we will probably be able to benefit from the fact that better and better stem cell treatments are coming our way. Very exciting. Not just when it comes to stem cells, it's about completely different things too. General health, longevity and stuff. So it's not just for the knee, where cartilage grows back, and so on. There are many areas where we can use these stem cells. HBOT, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. I was there in May 2022, in Heidelberg. I was in this pressure chamber 23 times. Here you can see a photo of me. There were always about 7 or 8 people sitting in there. And I was in there 5 times a week. And my son said that my mood got better afterwards. Funnily enough, the private health insurer, the €7,000, when I submitted it for the 3rd time, a year later, they actually paid it. Then a year later, I bought a pressure chamber myself for about €10,000 to €12,000. It's at my place at home, and at the beginning I used it very intensively. There's also an interesting study from Israel that telomeres lengthen, so longevity is also a topic. Although I have to admit, I haven't used the pressure chamber as intensively in the last few months, or the last year. In winter and in summer it's a bit warm in there. There is cooling built in. The air is cooled. But the effect on Parkinson's is probably not quite as strong. I'd guess I would need to do another phase where I use it more to get a feel for whether there's an improvement. But I don't think it's a direct one. Psilocybin. Also very promising. But not in Germany. It's not approved in Germany, so you can't just buy it, take it, or grow it. Exactly. Everyone has to decide for themselves whether they do it or not. You can buy these grow kits in the Netherlands or somewhere outside Germany, grow the stuff yourself, and then consume it. But in Germany, it's illegal. But there are interesting studies on it, that it's supposed to have a positive effect on Parkinson's, and also on longevity. And psilocybin is also used for dementia, depression, and so on. So it's a very interesting field that's increasingly coming into focus. I took it for a while. At first I started very gently, with 0.3 grams of dried mushrooms. Website. In the study, they basically took 5 grams once to achieve this effect, and I tried that too. I did once, although that's a very, very strong effect. I was at home alone. I was careful, yes, and spread it out. Over several hours, I took the 5 grams. My head was really buzzing, like a 100-watt bulb blazing at full power the whole time, non-stop. So yes, there was really a lot going on in my head. But unfortunately, it didn't have any effect on the Parkinson's. And on the 16th of August 2025, I took 5 grams, and for hours there was really a lot of action in my brain. And the light was really glaring, and so on. I genuinely had hallucinations, very strong ones. And you really have to be careful with that. So if you take too much, You should definitely make sure there's someone with you who can look after you if needed. Be careful. But there's psilocybin, and there are also studies. Maybe you can take part in a study, or in the Netherlands. There are also guided, professionally run courses where you can take part and then take psilocybin under medical supervision. Illegal. Abroad. Also very important, oral health. I had all my amalgam fillings removed. Unfortunately, I've got this damage from my youth, when I ate so many sweets, all the fillings, and whatever else. How I ruined my teeth. Yes, in any case, I had all the amalgam fillings removed. Then I also had my Rantes level measured. Fortunately, it was negative, so it wasn't abnormal for me. I also had a tooth that had root canal treatment. I had it taken out, because in my view root-treated teeth should simply be removed, you know, because you shouldn't have a dead tooth in your mouth. And there are repeated reports that bad teeth are linked to illnesses because they're very close to the brain and can cause damage there. Yes, right here. Mouth triggers, for instance. I added this recently. A tooth decay bacterium is suspected in Parkinson's. As you can see, there are always reports where the oral microbiome, not the gut microbiome, but the oral microbiome, plays a role. Parkinson. So you really should make sure you brush your teeth regularly, that they're in good condition, that there are no amalgam fillings, no root-treated teeth, and that you get things squared away and look after your health. Placebo is of course really interesting too. And you shouldn't underestimate how much you can train your mind to think as positively as possible and to believe in the things you're doing, you know? I'm sure that the alternative healing methods I use are not just placebo, but of course it's important for me to think positively and also to use the placebo effect. I keep trying new things. And that's why I keep giving myself new positive triggers, like riding a wave, with things I'm hoping will make it better. And that's how I stay in the flow and, so to speak, ride my placebo wave. I sort of surf along a bit and exactly. That's looking at it positively. Of course, you can do the opposite and see things negatively, and you shouldn't do that. You should believe that something works. A professor once said to me, I asked him whether he thought Parkinson's could ever be cured, and he said not even in 100 years. A statement like that is completely out of line. Even if it were true that it might be curable in 100 years, you can't just come out with something like that, can you? And that's not exactly positive thinking, is it? So it was clear to me that the statement was completely wrong. You have to take your life into your own hands. And I see the future very positively. Activating self-healing is ultimately a bit like placebo. You just have to believe in yourself, and there are lots of things you can't explain, you know? Not everything is tangible, and you shouldn't underestimate it. how far the mind can be activated and how it affects the body. You know, there are energies, I'd say, that you can steer positively in the right direction. You should make use of that. Longevity and beauty. That's also a top topic for me. There are some links to YouTube videos, especially with Nina Rouge. She specialized in that. And it's mainly about supplements, for example spermidine, glucosamine, creatine, taurine, psilocybin, lithium, and so on. It goes on a bit further down here, as you can see. So these things don't cost much either. These dietary supplements are actually relatively inexpensive. And in my opinion, well, not just my opinion, but according to the professors who do these interviews, or who are interviewed in them, they say that it will very likely have a positive effect on longevity. Health span. I don't know. Living to be 100 and then spending 10 of those years just lying in a care home. That's not the point, is it? So this is about quality of life into very old age. And Nina Rouge is there. She makes really great videos and interviews a lot of professors on the topic, including sleep. Sleep is obviously very important too, so feel free to take a look on my homepage. There are loads of links to interesting videos. Here's an overview of studies. Unfortunately, one is from January 23rd and the other is from 24. Yes, the top section is the disease-modifying treatments. Those are, of course, very interesting for us. And the others are the symptomatic treatments. And the symptomatic treatments, that's ELPA, and so on, that's not what we necessarily want. Because we want it to be healed a bit, and for the disease to be stopped, or possibly even reversed. That's why the disease-modifying treatments are of course the more interesting ones. There are 3 phases, phase 1, 2, 3. So it takes ages until it's all done. If something is in phase 1, lithium is in here for example. Until it then reaches phase 3, that takes many years before it gets approved. So in that case you can of course simply buy lithium. That's obviously best for us. We don't have to wait for that. But most things are medicines that you can't get hold of because they are made by the pharmaceutical industry. Tanganil, for example, is also an exception because it's available without a prescription, freely accessible. Or Ambroxol, this cough medicine for instance. You can buy that at any time. You can get it online. There's a study on it too. But many things are just from the pharmaceutical industry, and they have to go through these phases 1, 2, 3 until they get approval, and that drags on for ages. And often it's like that, unfortunately, or rather in the last 10, 20, 30 years not much has happened. Most of them don't even make it through, do they? So if you ever hear that something is happening in phase 1, you can sit back, wait probably 7 or 8 years, and then it probably won't be approved anyway because it didn't work. So unfortunately, it's very disappointing what's going on there. But people, or rather the companies, are still working away at it. You can see there's quite a lot going on here, and for me Buddha is very interesting. I also have a lot of shares in that company. And this, for example, is now phase 3, and I'm hoping there will be positive results this year. It's a molecule that has hardly any side effects, So it's a very exciting candidate. But as I said, in the end it can still be that it doesn't get approved. The chances, unfortunately, aren't that good when it comes to medicines. On the future, this is where I started speculating about the future. Of course, this isn't my own idea. It's also from Sven Gabor. He's a futurologist. And I also follow everything Elon Musk does. And I picked up some very interesting statements there as well. For one, how quantum computing, AI, and so on are advancing, self-driving cars, humanoid robots, and so on. So a lot will happen in the next few years. And I think that Parkinson's patients will benefit a lot from that too. And there are also very interesting videos here from Sven Gabor. You can click on it, and then a YouTube video starts. So it's very, very exciting. You should definitely have a look, so you know what's coming your way. Here are my ABS reports. At the beginning of 2021, I had an MRI scan to confirm the diagnosis again, just to be completely sure. Unfortunately, it was confirmed. Then I was at Hattingen University Hospital in March 21st. Then I was in Tübingen. On the 10th of May 2021, I was in Munich, and fortunately, this MDS-UPDRS test was done there as well, and I scored 19 points at the time. Then I had a genetic test done, and it was negative. Then the report from Cuba. Then on the 29th of April 2024, I was down to just 14 points, so I'd improved by 5 points. I had this test done in Mannheim, and then last year in late summer, on the 19th of August 2025, it was 15 points, so still an improvement of 4 points compared to the start. Which is of course a very good result. To achieve that score without conventional medical help is basically impossible. Yes, but you can see I managed it. So here are some statements about me. From my neurologist in Mannheim. From the professor in Cuba. From the naturopath in Mannheim. From my homeopath in Nuremberg. From my naturopath in Mannheim, and then also from a doctor in Munich who is affected herself, and who I'm in close contact with. Of course, they're all positive statements. If I'd had, at the start of my diagnosis, the information I went on to research, I could have been spared half a year of depression and a negative course of the illness. And if I could turn back time now, and had that information, I'd immediately do everything I researched in parallel, especially in parallel. Because the problem is that the illness normally progresses, and if you only focus, for example, on TPS, on Tanganil, or on the V-Light helmet, exercise, or homeopathy, you just don't have the time to wait half a year or 3 months each time to see whether something works or not. So my strategy is simply to do things in parallel, to take on board as much as possible of what's out there, and then see whether it has an effect. The only real obstacle is not having enough money, say for neuro, EPO, or TPS. If you're not privately insured, it's simply a much higher overall cost. But there are also plenty of things you can do in parallel, like lithium, Tanganil, microbiome transfer, homeopathy, dietary supplements, PDK. None of that is particularly expensive, and exercise of course. With the V-Light helmet. And I can only recommend doing everything in parallel, because you don't have the time to wait and see whether individual therapies work or not. And every doctor you go to If you go to a homeopath, they'll of course say homeopathy helps. Go to a TPS doctor and, unsurprisingly, they'll say TPS. They won't tell you exercise, homeopathy, take PDK, or get a microbiome. Everyone is a specialist in their own area and of course says it helps, but as a rule they don't look left or right at what else is available. And the neurologist definitely won't either. They'll say stem cell therapy and, for heaven's sake, there's no solid scientific evidence for that, or for neuro-EPO from Cuba. They won't recommend any of it. They can't. So if I were a neurologist, I wouldn't do it either. I'm not going to take the risk of being sued in the end. They have their training. They do what they learned in their studies, what's evidence-based, and that then gets prescribed and used. Otherwise, they just have a lot of work with you, because you'd be asking questions all the time and coming back again. That's a lot of effort for them. So as a neurologist, I wouldn't do it either. I would of course prescribe the tablets as well. I can understand the doctors. They simply don't have the time to look after patients that intensively. So you do have to take on that part yourselves. You have to go searching yourselves and become active